This is my wife, Becky, and we have 4 boys. 3 of them are in college at Fort Hays, and we have one that's a junior at Hillsborough High School. But we live on a farm that my great-grandfather moved to in 1904, and there's our boys are the 5th generation out there, and it doesn't make us rich, believe me. We put a lot of money back into that old place, but it's a heritage that I'd like to see continue, because I know a lot of young folks don't go to farms or aren't on farms. Any of you have grandparents that live on a farm? Some of you do? Okay, good. Some of you have hamburgers occasionally, don't you? Hamburgers? Do you drink milk? Do you eat eggs occasionally? Okay, well, a lot of these animals provide those kind of things. And a lot of those animals we use. We eat the eggs. We butcher some of these animals that we have on the farm, so we eat their meat. And we don't spin wool, but we do sell the wool to places that if you wear wool clothing occasionally, probably in wintertime, then you may be wearing some of the things that when we shear this sheep, you'll see what that looks like. Anyway, we'll start with the chicken, however. You've all seen chickens at the fair or various places at the zoo. They have that petting zoo. There's a few unique things about chickens that you may not know. This is the daddy chicken. He's called a what? Rooster. And every morning he's out there crowing because he's the top dog on our farm. He's an older rooster. We have some young guys, but they haven't quite shown what they're made of yet. So he's the king, you might say. Now, there's a few ways you can tell that he's a king. You'll know I got a little gray hair in the side of my head, right? Okay, that's because I'm almost 50. But when you get to be an old rooster, you know, I wake up in the morning sometimes, I see hair on places I didn't think I had hair, like on my ears, and I used to not have hair there, but now I do. And this old rooster, when they get old, see all these feathers up here by his eye? You know, that tells me that he's getting to be an old rooster, because as he gets older, just like, you know, these hairs in strange places on me, he gets feathers in strange places. So he's getting to be an old bird. Now, chickens have different kinds of combs. This red thing on top, some chickens have a great big long one with spikes on it. This one doesn't have this kind. He has what's called a rose comb. And you can feel it for a few of you want to feel that red thing on his head? Just touch that thing. Just touch that. He won't pick you. Just touch it and see what it feels like. Yeah. Yeah, and Becky, you can take that hen around and show them, let them feel. One thing about chickens is they won't hurt you. They're pretty tender. The things that'll hurt you are their feet, and I'm watching those. But one thing on a rooster, I can have your attention, is they have what's on their legs they call spurs. And that's what they fight with. If you have more than one rooster, they have to find the dominant, the top dog, and so they will fight with these spurs back here. Now this guy has been in many fights, and his spur is broken off. And that will get very sharp, and they can really hurt each other when they do that. But he is, like I say, he's old, and he's broken off that spur. But I have seen roosters with spurs that are that long. They can get very long. Now, Becky has a hen. This is one of the females. These are eggs that come from these chickens, from that chicken. That happens to be a chicken that lays brown eggs. Do you usually eat white eggs in the morning? Well, brown eggs, they're more expensive in the store for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. But these hens lay a brown egg. The hens, they'll lay the egg, and then they will sit, after they've got 15 eggs or so, they will sit on those eggs. And does anyone know, raise your hand if you know, how long it takes a hen like this to sit on her clutch of eggs before they hatch out little chicks? How long? It's more than 24 hours. Do you know? 10 hours, more than that. What about you? It's the days.
How many days?
21 days.
Nailed it. 21 days. It takes 3 weeks of sitting on those eggs before they will hatch. And what she'll do, every few hours, she will get up off her nest, she will use her bill, and she will turn those eggs because they can't stay in one position. She'll turn those eggs with her bill so that the top side that was getting warmed is underneath and warming up the bottom side. And they will hatch those eggs. Now those smaller eggs being passed around, they're smaller, but they would take 4 weeks to hatch because it's a different kind of bird. And we'll get that bird out now. If you were out on the plains of Africa, you would see these. These are a native bird of Africa, and they're like, we have pheasants in Kansas, which actually were imported from China, but we have quail and pheasant that you may know from hunting season in Kansas. But in Africa, these are the native fowl. This is called a guinea. And they are funny looking, aren't they? They have an ugly head. There's no feathers on it except these little hairs sticking up. They have this bump on their head. And this is a female. This is a little girl. If this was a male, these red wattle things would be much, much bigger. And that bump on the head would be much bigger also. These birds can really fly. I have to hang on to her tight because they do not tame down very easily. They are a wild bird. They'll scratch and kick. But in Africa, they roam the savanna and they eat insects. They're good birds to have on a farm because they eat a lot of insects, and what we also like is they don't dig around in the garden very much. They like to just run. They're very fast. They will run down insects. And they have a nice thick bill that they can crush a big beetle, and they're very strong birds and good flyers. And they don't dig, so they're good to have. But the one negative about guineas is that they are an owl's favorite food. And so we've raised a lot of guineas over the years, and they will roost in trees instead of in a shed. And the great horned owls love to eat them for a midnight snack. They must be very tasty because they are hard to keep alive through the wintertime when there are no leaves on the trees and they're easy to see, and the owls will take them almost immediately. So anyway, if they make a unique sound, and I was hoping maybe she would make that sound, but I don't think she's going to cooperate. Anyway, this is a guinea, and those eggs that Mrs. Davis is passing around, those smaller ones are guinea eggs. They take 4 weeks to hatch instead of 3 like a chicken. They're a very hard-shelled egg. You really have to bang those eggs to break them, a very thick shell on them. So those little guineas have to really pick for a while to break that shell open. How many of you raised your hand when you said you had milk this morning? A lot of you did. Okay, did you have goat milk for breakfast? Nobody had goat milk? Surprised at a few of you, yeah. Because some people cannot drink cow's milk because of some of the properties of cow's milk, but they can drink goat milk. This goat is about 5 years old. She's really very tame, but she's not used to seeing this many people around. And she had twins this winter, about in January. She had 2 babies, and they're old, or not old, but they are not drinking milk anymore. But she still has milk, and she's going to give me some of it here. This is a baby bottle. Any of your little brothers or sisters drink out of a bottle like this? None of them do? Okay, that's good because this is for a baby calf. It's for a baby calf, and I'm going to use this bottle. When we have bottle calves, we use this to feed them. We're going to see how much milk. How much milk? You think this goat can fill this up? You think she can? Well, let's see. It is tiring to milk an animal. It wears out your forearms. It wears out your hands real quick. Now, when we were milking cows, when we were in our old barn, we had lots of cats. And we had some cats that would sit on the ground like right there, and I would squirt a stream of milk like that, right into their mouth. And they would love it. They would sit there and drink that milk, and they thought that was just the cat's meow. Okay, remember how big that's called her udder. Remember how big it was when I started? That's how much milk she gave. Now, if we had a baby calf or a baby goat, now a baby goat, we put a different kind of nipple on here, but a baby calf, we would take it right out and we could feed it. But she has not been milked for quite a while, so this is not very much. She could fill this thing up 2 or 3 times if she was a couple weeks after she'd had her lambs. because that's kind of the peak, or about a month afterward, of their peak of their milk production. So she gives a lot of milk for one animal. You know, if you got this much every day, that'd be enough for your whole family, wouldn't it? You all need to get a little goat put in your backyard. We have a small herd of buffalo. And in 1988, a good friend of ours worked at, he managed Maxwell Game Preserve. Have any of you been out there by Canton? They have, one thing about animals, unless you have a dog or a cat, they know where to go to the bathroom at. You have a litter box or whatever. Goats, sheep, cattle, they go whenever the urge strikes them. So you may see that. One thing about farm animals, there's only one common farm animal that has good toiletry habits, excluding cats and dogs. And it's probably an animal that might surprise you, and that is hogs. Hogs, and you know, you hear about them wallowing in their own manure and mud and all that. But one thing hogs will do that no other farm animal will do, they will not go to the bathroom in the place that you feed them. If you feed them on cement like this, like a lot of farmers feed their sows on a cement pad like that, they will not go to the bathroom in that area. And no other farm animal will do that. They'll just, when the urge strikes them, they go. But hogs are smart and they won't do that. So, kind of an unusual thing. Anyway, in 1988, the guy, a friend of mine that managed Maxwell Game Preserve, they have a large buffalo herd out there. We got together, we had a little bit of native pasture, about 20 acres, that had not ever been plowed. And so we have a small herd of buffalo. We have 5 right now, a bull, two cows, and a yearling calf, and then a calf that was born a couple weeks ago. Anybody know what color baby buffalo are when they are born? Well, this is what color they are when they get older. This is a buffalo hide of one that we butchered several years ago. And this is the color of an adult buffalo. Now the Indians, when they were roaming the plains, they used the buffalo hide, and this would have been the outside. They would have scraped all the hair off this hide, and both sides would have looked like this. And you've seen what a teepee looks like. Well, it would have been like this. This is very soft, very strong. And if they wanted to make a coat out of a buffalo hide, this happens to be a young buffalo. It wasn't as old, but a big buffalo will make a big hide. And you can make a nice warm coat. Think of having all this nice warm fur against you. That would really be warm. Anybody know what color a baby buffalo is for about the first month of its life? What color is it? It's not brown. What color?
Tan.
Not tan.
White.
Not white. A white buffalo is very rare. Not black. Not red, but you're getting warm. You got to stand up. What's your name? Okay. This is kind of her shirt, her top here, is about the color of a baby buffalo. For the first month or so, they're kind of that color, then they get dark. And the reason for that is when buffalo are usually born is usually in April. And if you know much about the prairie, in the native grasses, they were tall, and after they've gone through the winter, those grasses are kind of an orangish brown. So that baby buffalo, when it's most vulnerable to attack by wolves that they had back then, or bears, that orange color matches the color of that grass that is still that color in April, because the native pastures don't green up until late May and June. So they would really blend in with the colors. So they're orange right now, and that baby buffalo is orange. Now since 1988, we've had a lot of buffalo born on that place, and our native pasture will only handle, the grass is only sufficient enough for about 4 buffalo. So when the young buffalo, when they get to be about 2 years of age, then we have to butcher them. We don't have a way of capturing them out there in the pasture, so we have to butcher them. And so we've done this several times, and one thing we always collect when we butcher is the skull. This happens to be the skull of a buffalo cow that we had. And we had her for a long time. We had her for about 18 years. She was getting to where she didn't have calves anymore, and we decided it was time that that she became some of our meals. And we were a little hesitant of that because that's an old animal. She was probably 25 years old. We didn't know how she would turn out, but her meat was excellent, very tender, and she was very tasty. But anyway, we also got this from her. This is a buffalo skull, an old buffalo skull. And one of our sons boiled this skull for many, many hours and boiled all the meat, all the skin off of it, and then he bleached it. And that's why it's so white. If this had been out on the prairie, these horns would not look like this. They did when she was alive, but they don't anymore. And it would probably look like this. This part would have fallen off, and the skull would look like this out on the prairie, just that stub. Now we've saved these. Now what do you think the Indians used these for back when they were butchering buffalo? What do you think they used that for in the white shirt? Exactly. This would make a nice watering cup. It's hollow. Drink out of it. Great little cup. A buffalo is a bovine. It has a cleft hoof. It has a hoof that's in two parts, like the goat has also. And they obviously eat, they eat grass, right? A buffalo has a very long, rough tongue, and they will stick that tongue out like a cow will, and they will grab a clump of grass with that long tongue, and they will pull it up, and they have teeth on their bottom jaw out here. They have teeth. This is their jaw out here. This is their lower jawbone. And out here on the end, if they hadn't fallen off, there are some teeth right out here on the end. And they will raise that head with their tongue that has grasped the grass, and they will tear that grass off and swallow it. Now, once a buffalo or a cow or a goat, once they swallow that grass, then it goes back into their belly, and they swallow it. They have 4 stomachs, actually. 4 stomachs. Now, if you watch a cow or a buffalo, you'll notice something coming up their throat. And you can tell that something's coming back up, and that's called their cud. And they bring the grass back from one of their stomachs, and they chew it some more. And the way that works is they spit it up, and you see these teeth right here? They're back in the throat a ways. Remember, the jaw is like this. So the nose is way out here. You want to point that, Becky, where the nose is? The nose is way out here. So they will bring that cud up, and then they will chew it back on these teeth back here, like this. You've seen a cow maybe chewing her cud, and it's kind of a motion like that. And there's teeth on the bottom and the top, and if I can get Kathy or maybe Becky, somebody to pass this around, and show them how flat those teeth are. They're nice and flat. If this was a wolf or something like that, you have your canines and your fangs. Well, they don't have those because they don't eat meat. They just use their teeth for grinding. And she'll show you how flat that tooth is. This is a female sheep. It's called a ewe, E-W-E. This happens to be what's called a Western ewe. It's kind of a mix of several different breeds of sheep. It's well adapted for Kansas because it eats grass, obviously. And they're pretty docile. And the way you tell how old a sheep is that you have her smile at you. See that smile? Let me open her up a little bit. She has a smile right here. And actually she's older than what I thought she was. She has lost all her teeth. That means she's probably not going to be around. She's like if you were 90 years old in a human age. She's getting really old. She's lost all her bottom teeth. Remember, she doesn't have any teeth on the top. She has no teeth on the bottom, so it's going to be hard for her to eat grass here pretty quick. So that's why she's not real fat. If she was fat, she wouldn't have this depression right here. And she's just getting to be a pretty old animal. So she had 1 lamb this year, which we still have at home. And she's been a good ewe. Now, the thing about shearing sheep, if you hold them right, they don't struggle very much. And so there's techniques on how to hold them where they don't get hurt, I don't get hurt, and it works pretty well. Now, some people can shear a sheep, and I've seen a sheep sheared in a couple minutes, the really good ones. I don't shear enough sheep that I'm not real fast, and I try to be careful too. One thing about shearing a sheep is that occasionally you nick them a little bit. So as we're shearing, you may see, oh gosh, she's bleeding a little bit. And I have a spray that I'll spray on those cuts. but sheep heal really quick, and they can have a little bit of a cut and it doesn't hurt them. Okay, now the first thing I have to do with this sheep is I have to flip her on her, so she's sitting up, kind of like she's sitting in a chair at school. So, just so you know what we're doing here. Okay, okay. Now, she has had this wool on her since I sheared her last June. So she's had this coat on for almost a year. Now, it hasn't been washed except by the rain occasionally, and where they sleep, if they're in the shed, you know, it's not real clean. So look, you know, she's pretty dirty looking, isn't she? Doesn't look very clean. She has all these little things here where there's mud and manure in it. She looks pretty ugly right now. We need to clean her up, don't we? Yeah. Okay. Now, notice how brown she is and kind of ugly, and notice her size, how big she looks right now, and see how she looks when we're done, okay? The first thing when you shear a sheep, you have to shear her tummy. And that's sometimes the hardest part because she's got all these, where she's been laying, it's kind of yucky under there. They don't see that. I mean, they go to the store, it's on the shelves, they don't know the whole process of where that comes from. And back in the old days, you know, they had to milk that cow by hand to get that milk that was either put on their front doorstep or however it was done. And so they need to know that it was done that way. I think they do anyway, to see what that's all about. Now the hardest part to shear on a sheep is the neck, because the neck has a lot of folds of skin on it, and so I've got to stretch that neck out and come up this side, and that's always hard to do because a lot of times that's the one time when they kind of fight with me a little bit, and it's just a tough area to shear. So this is a hard part. After this is done, then it goes a lot easier. Well, it's important to me that kids understand our rural heritage. There aren't many young people going back to the farms. There's very few farms that have an assortment of animals like this because they're all becoming so big and that sort of thing. And so I have a passion to inform people what life was back in the early part of the previous century, so they know that, you know, you had to have sheep and goats and cattle. You had to have a little bit of everything, and how that was a part of our heritage. I don't want that to be lost. And part of that is because we live on that family farm, and I feel compelled to preserve that and let people know about it. If they can see a sheep being shorn, as opposed to just seeing a picture of wool fleece sitting there, they can see the process. They can see they get cut. That it's still a humane way how you hold them without them struggling and they're not being hurt. Yeah, they need to see that. They learn more just from that, and learning things about chickens. You know, that there really is an animal that lays that egg, and what they look like, and the different kinds and different colored eggs, and all those kind of things. It's all things that they need to know. Those foodstuffs don't come miraculously on your table. They are produced somewhere, some way. Now it gets a little easier because I can put a layer on her side. And the neat thing about sheep is that I can put as long as I keep my foot underneath her shoulder, she's just going to lay there. I don't have to put my hand on her. She's not struggling at all. She'll just lay there like that while I shear her. And you see a couple little nicks, but those are just little scratches for her. So she'll just lay there like that while I shear, and it'll go quicker. Hold it right in here.
Right here?
And just with this hand. I'll take that one off. Just need one hand. And you just ride along the skin. Kind of let it float right along. There you go. You got it? Hold it right there next to the skin. Kind of turn it this way.
Okay, wait, I got it.
Got it? There you go. Go right on up the neck here. Okay, does she look better now? Yeah. Now one thing about sheep when they're born they have long tails. Does she have a tail? No. When she's about a day old, we put a tight little rubber band on her tail. And after about 2 weeks it falls off. Because if you leave a tail on a sheep, then it gets full of manure and they don't sell very well at market and it attracts flies and maggots. So we cut those, well, we don't cut them off. The rubber band, they drop off after a while. Now the neat thing about sheep, whoa, hope that's a, that's one math book you won't have to use again. Okay. You can tell your parent the sheep went to the bathroom on it and they'll never believe it. One thing neat about sheep is they have a special oil called lanolin. See how shiny my gloves are? And my boots are getting kind of shiny too. They have a nice wool on a nice warm day like this. If you were to come up and touch her, she has it feels kind of oily. And if it was really hot, she'd really be oily. But that's an oil that they use in a lot of hand lotions and that sort of thing. And soap. So she looks a lot happier now compared to the other one. Still has her wool on. Okay, this is wool, obviously. And the neat thing about wool is that there's all different kinds. This is that was a fine wooled sheep. The sheep fibers, depending on the kind of sheep, some have a big curve in them, and that's a coarse wool. This is a fine wool, and it's the kind people like that do spinning. It's the kind they like because it makes better thread and yarn, and it's easier to spin. But you were an excellent audience. I liked how quietly you sat while we were doing this. It's hard to do that when we got a big group of young people. So you did a really super job.